Okay, and Sam Kenny is away, and Chris Blackstone can't make it, and Colin White is our new town council rep, and he can't make it tonight. But I just want to thank Megan Braybeck for her service as our rep over the past few years.
Yeah.
And we'll welcome Colin hopefully at our next meeting. So tonight, Giuliani, I'll appoint you as a voting member, fill in for one of the absents. And we're going to start with our guest speaker. Joshua Mckeezy is a wildlife biologist with New Hampshire Fish and Game's non-game and endangered wildlife program. Since 2014, he's been the state's project lead for at-risk turtle population monitoring and conservation of Blandings, wood, spotted, and eastern box turtles. He also works with other herpetofauna projects and provides technical assistance to private landowners, land trusts, municipalities, state and federal agencies, and non-governmental organizations. Josh developed a deep connection to reptiles and amphibians as a young boy in the Lakes region of New Hampshire. And Josh is going to talk to us about turtles around us and their habitats. And Josh is going to be on Zoom, so hopefully this will all work. And Josh, are you ready?
Yeah, let me do share screen here. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
That's a yes?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Great. All right, well, thanks for having me. I guess before I start, how long do I have? I forgot to ask that.
20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay.
And then with questions.
Great. All right, I'll move right through it then. So thanks for the introduction. Thanks for having me. My name's Josh Mckeezy. I'm the turtle biologist with the non-game and endangered wildlife program at Fish and Game. Blandings turtles that I'll be talking about mostly tonight is a species that I first started working with, and actually the first place that I ever started work on Blandings turtles was in Newmarket, Durham line. And so sort of an important area, and I'm going to talk a lot about that today, but I just wanted to kind of give you a little background. And since then, I've moved on to different projects, but right now we're doing wood turtle surveys statewide. So we've moved to a different species, but we'll come back to Blandings turtles in a couple more years, actually. So that'll be exciting. So I'm going to mainly talk about Blandings turtles, but I am going to get into spotted turtles as well. It's another state-listed species, and the reason for that is we've done a lot of work now with both species, but there's a lot of overlap in their habitat use and life history as well. So, but I'm just going to give you a little background on Blandings turtles for those of you who don't know much about them. So Blandings turtles are a large aquatic, semi-aquatic, semi-terrestrial turtle, really. A characteristic big yellow throat, long neck, high domed shell, sometimes speckled with some yellow, and mostly dark brown or black shell and skin. So really noticeable turtle. When people see them crossing the roads, it kind of jumps right out at them. Sometimes they're confused with box turtles because of that domed shell. Blandings turtles are a wetland species. They prefer shrub swamps, forested wetlands, emergent wetlands, and vernal pools, which are very important for them as well. So they're not typically found in large open water ponds or lakes. Sometimes they'll visit, but they don't hang out for long. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. They're a southeast New Hampshire species, so the core of their population is really kind of like the Newmarket out to Pawtuckaway and Bear Brook State Park, and beyond down to Londonderry, New Hampshire as well. But that's kind of like the core. And it also happens to be the part of the state with the fastest development. So there's going to be some challenges, obviously. And Blandings turtles have a really, really large home range. I'm going to show you some radio telemetry data that we did when we tracked some individuals a few years back. But they wander extensively across the landscape, moving from wetland to wetland and wetland to vernal pool, sometimes spending weeks in the surrounding forests, kind of hunkered down in some leaves, or going to nesting areas, which are open sandy soils typically. So huge home ranges and long-lived. So right now we have the oldest recorded Blanding's turtle, which was down south. Oh, where was it? I forget what state it was, but it was 80 years old anyway. So that's the oldest one recorded as now. Spotted turtles are, again, similar, a little bit of a smaller home range, but they require the same kind of habitat and connectivity, really, because they need to move between wetlands and vernal pools, especially, or shrub swamps or forested wetlands to vernal pools. They're very secretive, and they're smaller than Blanding's turtles, and those yellow spots that you see there are not that noticeable when they're down at the bottom of a vernal pool or even sitting on the forest floor. The way the sun sort of spangles down through the leaves in the forest, it just is an excellent camouflage, so they're really hard to find. And they are secretive. They spend a lot of time down in the moss or under leaves or in the water. Even basking is pretty cryptic. They'll use shrubby areas or tussocks in the wetlands, but also very long-lived. They can live up to 60 to 70 years. And very similar distribution in the state, mostly southeast. There's some outlying populations, which we hope to learn more about because there's some interesting things happening there that we don't really understand. And in some of the other states, they have the same kind of scenario. So I'm sorry if that's cut off, but that says emergent wetlands. So emergent wetlands are often used by both species, and they're typically the kind of pond or wetland where maybe a beaver had impounded a river a long time ago and killed off the trees, like in this picture, and you have these dead standing snags, and water shield and lily pads are pretty common. So they'll use that quite often. They'll hibernate in that kind of situation as well. They hibernate aquatically, by the way, so they're under the water in the winter. Bogs and fens are used by both species, and so these are excellent for both because there's little pockets of water in these, and they're not often seen, so they can avoid detection by predators and even people. Shrub swamps are probably their favorite habitat overall. They like the structure, the woody stems that are in shrub swamps, so buttonbush and blueberry, species like that sort of give a lot of structure, and it allows the Blandings and the spotted turtles to get down into those root masses, hibernate and find protection, and there's also a lot of forage in there for them. That's just a different picture. That's Pawtuckaway. And forested wetlands are used maybe not as often, but really important piece in the whole puzzle. So wetland diversity is sort of kind of the key message here. These sometimes will be seasonal, so sometimes they'll almost act like a vernal pool, but there's usually some connectivity to a larger wetland system. But they find a lot of forage in there, and they actually use a lot of those areas for mating. And vernal pools seem to be probably the single most important feature on the landscape for both species. And the reason for that is that vernal pools have a tremendous amount of food for them in the early spring when they're first coming out of hibernation and they're warming up their bodies in the sun, and they can go into a vernal pool and they can gorge on salamander and frog eggs and a whole bunch of other invertebrates as well, and plant materials too. Some vernal pools, despite the name, do not dry up completely. The ones that don't, or at least don't often, Blandings and spotted turtles will both hibernate in those vernal pools all winter. So the top will freeze over and they'll be down there in the leaf litter and waiting for spring. And it's a good strategy if it doesn't dry up, because they wake up in the spring and they have a buffet. And there's just a salamander egg mass in a vernal pool. The upland habitats are almost as important as the wetlands because, again, they use them extensively to go from wetland to wetland. They spend a considerable amount of time just hanging out in the woods and shrubby areas, but they also use open sandy areas for nesting. And so these open sandy areas tend to be limited in the state. And so old gravel pits, roadsides, driveways, mulch piles, things like that, and especially in residential areas, Blanding's turtles will use those. And so that's one of the challenges we have in managing these populations, is sort of like, where do we create nesting habitat that's going to benefit them the most? So this is that radio telemetry study that we did, and I wanted to talk about a little bit. And this is over in Durham. But I hope you can see my mouse. This was a female that we tracked for 2 years. And there's a vernal pool right here next to the road. In April, she actually woke up, or she came out of hibernation. She hibernated in that vernal pool that never dries up. And through the season, so basically April April to June, she went from this vernal pool to this vernal pool, and then a series of different wetlands throughout the system, finally making it all the way down here in June, which is a backyard. Well, it's more like a big field. And she nested there. And that distance, as the crow flies, is 1 mile. And she proceeded to lay her eggs, turn around, and go all the way back to that vernal pool by October, where she settled in for the winter. She does that every single year, or she did that every single year that we were tracking her. In the meantime, since then, we learned that we really needed to do some habitat management in here. So we opened up some forested areas up in this area where she seemed to spend the most amount of time, and we created nesting habitat that that we actually found her using after a couple of years. So that was pretty exciting. And turtles, especially in high density areas, the idea is sort of like if you build it, they will come. They're very sensitive to changes in the landscape. So opening up a canopy, they're drawn to it. And if a nesting site looks good and available, they'll change their patterns, but they do have high site fidelity. So it's got to be in the right place for them to take advantage of it. This is just how we capture turtles. We use these large hoop traps, and we bait them with sardines. And as you can see, we actually put them in vernal pools, and we check them every day, and we process the turtles that are in there and release them, sometimes putting radio transmitters on them temporarily. And that's kind of what it looks like. Those ones are a little messy, but and how we monitor the populations is we have a standardized protocol that we use, and this is regional, so that we can compare results over time and from state to state. And there are these reference plots, and there's these circles that are they're 400 meter radius circles, and there's 5 traps in each circle. So we do 20 traps, and we check and rebait every day for a period of 12 nights for our long-term sites. If we're doing exploratory monitoring, just to figure out, if there are turtles in an area, we'll do 4-night trapping events. I'm going to skip that for now because I know I don't have too much time. But I just wanted to kind of touch on the fact that so through all of that work, we created priority areas for the species for both Blandings and spotted turtles, as well as wood turtles. But there's a whole bunch of criteria that fed into the designation of these areas. And so it was, partially due to the trapping results, how many turtles we had in the area, like a population estimate, but also landscape integrity, roads, development, conservation land, like all those things fed into it. And we created these sort of like best of the best populations that we knew that, they were going to be our best shot for long-term preservation. What we found was that New Hampshire actually is 41% of the regional population. So the distribution from basically Mass and New York up to Maine, New Hampshire has the largest. So we're kind of like right in the middle of the Blanding zone. And the reason for that is just that we have we still have fairly large areas that are protected and forested with intact wetlands. And so all of those conservation areas that I talked about before, they feed into a conservation area network that's regional. And so turtles don't have political boundaries, and so we need to manage the species regionally and not just in the state. So we work together on a regular basis with our working group. And this is the New Hampshire priority sites. The big one, we have Pawtuckaway and Bear Brook are the big ones. Down here would be Londonderry, and then and then we have the Durham and then Newmarket sites to the east. And so each one of those sites we created management plans. So we identified the threats there, we identified the conservation actions there, and these are living documents. So as we're going through and we're resampling the populations every 5 years, we're learning new things and we update our management plans. We also feed into it the work that we've done in those sites. And so that's sort of like an ongoing effort. But if Newmarket ever wants to have a conversation about some of the details of it, we can do that. I don't share it publicly because there's a lot of information in there that's pretty sensitive, like the core of these populations and the highest densities. And so, but there's a lot of good information in there, and we're using it in many of these places now. And that's just another map. And so this is kind of what you'd see when we create these turtle nesting habitats. And so we do most of the work in the winter, but sometimes we can go in and the site's already wide open and we can just dig up the soil and it's already sandy and turtles will nest in it. Other times the soils are just too organic and the turtles can't nest in it, or they can't incubate in the darker organic soil because it doesn't drain well enough, and we have to bring in sand. And so that's what we did in Durham. We've done it in Londonderry, Pawtuckaway now, Bear Brook, and private landowners as well. We've engaged with them quite a bit over the last 3 years, doing a lot of that. So I'm just going to get into the big threats and some of the ways that hopefully we can deal with these threats. And before I get into that, I spent a lot of time talking about the at-risk turtle species and at-risk reptiles and amphibians, but it's important to know that even the common species might not always be so common. So reptile and amphibian populations are globally declining from a variety of threats. So everything that we do here for Blanding's turtles as an umbrella is going to protect a lot of other species in the process. So road mortality is a big issue. June is kind of like the peak for Blanding's turtles because that's when the females start coming out to nest. And so, they didn't evolve with cars. And so a road doesn't mean anything to them other than there's some sandy soil on the side of it, or there's a nesting grounds on the other side of the road that they've been going to for decades. And so they will cross roads, and they do, and they get struck. And in some parts of the state, it's a huge issue. So residential and commercial development is just a habitat loss. So we're seeing areas where they're rapidly developing, and there's permits and all that stuff, and there's all this effort going into protecting a wetland like this one here. But for wildlife and turtles in particular, that's a sink. That's basically just a big genetic sink. The turtles that live there are what we call the walking dead. They may live there for another 50 years because they live so long, but they're not going to be able to reproduce. They're not going to be able to. The demographic is there's going to be a huge skew in the demographics, and it's just going to be all adults until they're eventually gone. So land protection is key. It's definitely the highest ranked conservation action, and so. Newmarket has been doing a great job. Southeast Land Trust has been really doing a great job with just identifying and securing a lot of these places. We've been working closely with NRCS. I know sounds like next month you have Matt Larkin coming, so he can talk a lot about, WREs, those are wetland reserve easements, and some of the incentives that are there for landowners. And I'll talk about it a little bit in a second as well. And so commercial and casual collection is also a big issue. Some of these turtles are now getting shipped illegally over to Asian markets, of the wet markets, so they keep them live. And they're used for food, medicine, and even pets. Southeast Asia has significantly depleted their freshwater turtle populations, and so they're needing to import freshwater turtles. And so we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing it here in the U.S. too, just for the pet trade, the illegal pet trade. But it's becoming more of an issue, and the prices are getting higher and higher. So people are taking more risks. And so we're seeing these crazy things like people stuffing turtles down their pants or wrapping them in tinfoil and putting them in hamburger packages and all kinds of things. But the fines are low relative to the crime, and so people do it because it's less of a risk than trading narcotics, for example. And I just mentioned that the prices are going up, and it is the fifth, wildlife trade is the fifth largest contraband trade, just behind narcotics. So life history characteristics matter. So these turtles, blandings in particular, they don't start reproducing until they're 15 years old, approximately. So one female that, gets to actually live to be 15 years old, she's a very, very important turtle for that population, because she's finally contributing to the next generation, hopefully. And so we spend a lot of time creating nesting habitat. We want hatchlings, and we need eggs in the ground, but the big concern is always protecting females, and so adult females. And so that's dealing with road mortality issues and roadkill hotspots and underpasses, and creating nesting habitat that keeps turtles from crossing roads. And this is a good way to think about it. I always show this because this just kind of hits it right on the head. White-tailed deer here on the right, they've had their first young at age 2, moose at age 3, bear at age, looks like 6, and then snapping turtles over here, they start laying eggs when they're between 15 and 17, something like that. That's a long time, and so by the time after 17 years, the deer produced 912 young, the moose 681, the bear 25, and the snapping turtles are just laying like 12 eggs. Maybe they're going to get dug up by a raccoon, maybe some will hatch, and then those hatchlings have to live another 17 years. So it takes a long time to recover populations once they get to once they get too low. I'll skip that for now, but every once in a while somebody asks me, like, what does it matter if a Blandings turtle goes extinct? And the main point is, yes, they have the right to exist, but protecting biodiversity is the key. So every time we lose a species, we're losing, we're really losing a buffer, and the deleterious effects on the ecosystem can be felt pretty quick. So I mentioned NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service, under USDA. We've been working under a grant for the last 3 years with NIFWIF and Southeast Land Trust, Bear Paw, Nature Conservancy, basically providing technical assistance and incentives for landowners to do conservation for turtles specifically. So a lot of that's been land protection and easements, but a lot of it's been on the ground, like management and changing the way, like a hay farmer does their time restrictions on haying operations up north, where we have wood turtles getting hit by haying machinery. Or creating nesting habitat on somebody's 40 acres of woodland. So far, it's been a really successful program, partnership, but it's ongoing, and it will be ongoing into the future. And it's really important because we can do all this work on conservation land and state land and federal land, but we got to connect the dots, and we got to fill in those gaps, and that's how we're going to do it. And there's a whole bunch of different practices that landowners can kind of sign up for and be incentivized for. And this flyer has a lot of that information on there. And you can find this on the NRCS website. Just type in working lands, working lands for wildlife, Northeast turtles, and you can get this flyer. I mentioned data sensitivity. Because of the poaching issues and illegal collection, we don't give out some of our priority areas. And so we create maps that are sort of more general so that people can say, like, hey, I live in Newmarket, you know, and I have this property, and I'd be interested in doing some conservation work. And then we can take a finer look at it and say, okay, yes, you're in a good spot because there's a wetland here and a vernal pool here, and there's no sandy areas for nesting or whatever. And so broadly, we don't share that data because of that issue. It's scary how quickly poachers can key in on these areas and clean them out, and we've been seeing it in other states. Luckily, not here yet that we know of. Reporting observations is always important. It doesn't matter if it's the same turtle you see every year crossing a road. Report it, because that's important information for us. It informs some of the work that we're going to be doing with road crossings and aquatic organism passage, upgrades of culverts, and all that kind of stuff. So keep reporting it. You can email photos and locations to RARP@Wildlife, or use the Wildlife Sightings website and create an account and do it that way. But definitely keep them coming. All reptiles and amphibians can be reported. I think it's all wildlife now. Another tool on Granite View, if some of you are familiar with that, is the Trails for People and Wildlife. And so this tool allows you to look like on your town forest or conservation land, and you know, if you already have a trail system going through there, you can take a look at the trails that are there and how much an impact they might have on wildlife, and especially some of these sensitive species like blandings and spotted turtles. So this is a great tool for designing trails or trail closures, or you know, putting in new trails, or adding to existing trails. Reporting species is really important, but I think vernal pools at this point is probably even more important. And the reason for that is they're underreported. And if we don't know they're there, and sometimes it's hard to know that they're there because they're under a dense canopy sometimes, we can't do anything to protect them. And so they're so important for turtles, but they're important for all these other organisms as well. They're a unique habitat type. So report vernal pools, even if you think somebody's already done it, or it's an obvious one somewhere on the side of the road. Report it to us, because it's just going to help inform the way we monitor these species in the future, but also some of the conservation actions. I wanted to mention too that towns can, so right now the general practice is if there's a forestry operation or some kind of development or something like that, they buffer a vernal pool by 50 feet. What we know is that you really need like 300 feet plus to protect amphibian biodiversity and turtle biodiversity as well. So towns can, you know, change those buffers through ordinances, and they can change it to 300 feet, and or you know, just establishing connections between vernal pools and wetlands. And it makes a big difference, because protecting a vernal pool in the middle of a development isn't going to do anything for anybody. There's nowhere for animals to disperse to. There's no genetic exchange, or very little. And it, again, becomes sort of like a sink. So we need connectivity for the turtles and the amphibians and everything else in between. So I'm just about done here. I just wanted to say that the non-game program that I work for, we rely on, and a lot of my work is done through Fish and Wildlife grants. They're state competitive wildlife grants. But we also rely on moose plate, conservation license plates. That's close to 30% of our revenue. And then donations are the other big one. We get very, very little from the state general fund or tax revenue. So thank you for those who have a moose plate. Thank you for those who have donated. We greatly appreciate it. We can't do it without you. And I'll take any questions. I'm sorry if that went long. I try to pack everything in there.
No, that was perfect, Josh.
Okay.
Great. If we can get yourself back on the screen, that would be nice. We can ask some questions, comments.
Yeah. Well, let me see.
Yeah. Yeah, that was awesome. That photo of the turtles taped up is pretty gut-wrenching, actually, to see. So we've done a few things in Newmarket that I think are really helpful in terms of turtles. We have the turtle signs that go up, alerting people to nesting turtles. But I had a couple questions, Joss. One about culverts and stream crossings, and we've done one. The Lumberland Creek was done to help wildlife passage, and we have this one issue on Ash Swamp Road. And could you talk a little bit about the benefit of doing that, or whether we should or not?
Yeah. So I think that it's not gonna solve the problem for turtles, but it's gonna reduce the amount of turtles that do cross the roads. And so it's, a nice big box culvert is going to be 10 times better than a 12-inch corrugated pipe or 2 or 3 of them, because turtles won't go through that. They won't go through a tiny dark tunnel. It's too much of a risk. There could be predators in there. They don't like it. So what we see though with turtles is sometimes they have such high sight fidelity, and almost like they're like little GPS brains, and sometimes they've been going the same route year after year. So sometimes they'll create a big box culvert for turtles to go through, but they just go ahead right next to it over the road because they've been doing that for 15 years or something like that. So it's a little bit tricky, but again, there's turtles that are moving aquatically and they just slip right through there, and they may not even notice it, and it's going to be one less dead female. What they're experimenting with now, and Maine just finished a huge project, is large daylit culverts, and so there's some ability for light to get through the roadway through like a grate. Daylighting helps a lot because, again, they don't like going through these dark areas because of predators. But the other thing that Maine has experimented with and seems to be successful but expensive is sort of like putting up chain link fence from the culvert down the road, a significant amount of distance, and that just sort of funnels these turtles into the area because they will just keep moving down the line until they have to go through the culvert. And that seems to be working pretty well. But again, they're doing a lot of camera monitoring on some of these sites, so we'll see how effective it really is. But again, I'm all for these upgrades. They're desperately needed in some places, and there's one, I believe, on Ash Swamp Road, right? That's going to be upgraded.
No, we're still in discussion, and that's why we want your input on that, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that one, there's really nothing else to do there but give them a wider berth, so to speak. And so really just kind of giving a larger area for them to move through. So, it's...
Are there grant funds for does the state have funding for that kind of work?
There are grants for that. And right now I'm working on sort of like technical assistance for this grant, but it's an EPA grant, and they're looking at road crossings and culvert upgrades across the state, but the focus is on Blanding's turtles. So a lot of these sites are already on that radar, especially in Newmarket and Durham, and so they're going to be they're going to be the target for that funding. And so we're just in the early stages of that. So there's going to be some money for that. I know that the Nature Conservancy, I'm not sure where it's at right now. They had some stimulus money that they were, looking to do more of that kind of stuff with. And I'm just not sure where that's at right now. But identifying it's the first thing, if it's a priority for the town, and it's a priority for us, then, you know, I think there's a really good chance of getting some decent amount of funding for it.
Okay, that'd be great. We'll follow up with that. Anybody else I have one more question, but anybody else want a question? Can you talk about what your recommendations are on field mowing? Like, when do you recommend that if it's being hayed, when should you wait until mow?
Are you talking about for wood turtles or?
Yeah, we have a conservation area on the Piscassic River that we have a local farmer hay it, and I'm not entirely sure when he hays it, but it would be good guidance for us to give to him to know when to mow it.
Yeah, so that's tricky. First cut is usually kind of like, you know, early June for a lot of hay farmers. That's typically the worst possible time to be haying a field, because that's when the females have moved up and are getting ready to go nest, or they've completed nesting and they're just up in the field foraging. They spend a ton of time in hay fields. They just love it. And so the best time, delayed mowing is best if they can wait. And I know haying is just a tricky thing, and it depends on, you know, the way the wind's blowing and how much humidity's in the air and all this stuff before they can bale it. But like, delaying it even a couple weeks can be a good thing. The better solution that we've seen now is just leaving a buffer that's unmowed until after October. The buffer can be 30 feet, could be 20 feet. It's just an area where, so most of the wood turtles that get hit with machinery are within that area. They're right at the edge of the forest and the hayfield, which makes sense because they have cover of the forest and they come out to get sun in the hayfield and forage. And so establishing a buffer, so the farmer's going to lose, like, you know, X amount of bales of hay, but they're going to probably save a lot of turtles. And NRCS does have incentives for buffers on hayfields and delayed mowing practices. So there are solutions there and money there. So that would be the best. And the best of the best is retiring a hayfield completely. But that can be a hard sell.
Yeah, although this is conservation land, so it's sort of up to us to decide, I think, how to manage it. So, okay, that's helpful. Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah, sure.
When you say retire the hayfield, do you mean just not use it for hay and mow it at some time, but keep it a field in the long run?
Yeah, so the field, a field or old field habitat is really important. So yeah, mowing it every 5 years in October. Yeah. You know, just knock it back and let it come back a little bit shrubby, but that's like the ideal, because we do need those habitats. They're really important and they're limited.
Actually, I had one more question that I was going to ask earlier. I was ask you one more question.
Sure.
Curious of the effect. So if a wetland, so you mentioned that they may nest in a vernal pool or hibernate in a vernal pool if it keeps water. So the question, I guess, would apply to a vernal pool or a wetland. So if there's hibernating turtles in the wetland, and say in late winter, early spring, there's a very large water level drop to where large expanses are exposed mud, and like there were maybe like 6 or 8 or 12 inches of water is now just a mud flat. So yeah. What happens in, say, late March, April, if something like that happens? Is the turtle able to move, or how much water do they hibernate in depth?
Yeah, it could be. I've tracked them into 18 inches of water, and then there's usually soft material that they go down deeper into, but 18 inches is probably the minimum that I've seen anyway in New Hampshire. So to answer your question, if there was a huge kind of like drawdown or drought sort of situation, like there's no snow and the turtle was hibernating in there. If the ice is broken up and the temperatures are, above 40, that turtle can, get its act together, get out of the vernal pool and actually go into a nearby wetland. We've seen it happen before with some really cold temperatures. They'll go over snow and ice and everything, and they'll go into another spot. But that's like, there's a risk there. And so altering hydrology of wetlands and perennial pools anytime in the winter is probably one of the worst possible times to do it because of that, And if they get stuck up in the cold and there's a freeze, then they're done.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Questions? Oh, thanks, Josh. That was super interesting and helpful for us. Appreciate your time tonight. And I'm sure we'll be in touch on specifics down the road, or if we have questions. We have some things to think about that we could help with further.
Great. Well, stay in touch, and thanks for inviting me, and yeah, we'll be seeing you around.
All right.
Excellent.
Thank you.
very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
All right.
That was great.
That
Thanks
was very
for
good.
arranging that.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, who's not here. Thanks for arranging that. It's very
That's
good.
right.
Okay, we're going to move on to approving the meeting minutes from April 14th. Does anybody have any changes? No. Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes from April 14th.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Unanimous. All right. I am still doing the finance report, so let me find out where I put it. That was in your packet. So let's see. Get my numbers here. Okay. So the conservation fund balance is $160,955.10. The Richard Shanda Fund is still at $4,764.46. And just a reminder that we have approved expenditures of around $79,000 from the conservation fund, so our balance is more around $81,000 once we pay out those expenditures. And we have not gotten any current use change tax for a couple years, and that's the funding for the conservation fund. We did have a couple contributions to the conservation fund. One was our $5,000 LRAC grant, which we're using for Heron Point, so that's also in our total. And we get the Land and Community Heritage Investment Program, LCHIP, gives an entity some money each year to do the monitoring of easements that they hold. So they hold an easement on the Piscasset-Glazell, and we send that report as well as the one that you do. My name is escaping me, but then, so we got $500 from LCHIP for submitting those reports. So thank you and Sam for, David, you and Sam for doing that. Okay, the general fund balance is on the back. So, okay. General fund balance is $111.03. And expenditures, pretty much for the part-time salary and some supplies. Any questions about finance report? Okay. All right, our next is, sorry for the delay in getting to you, the funding request from the Newmarket Fishing Derby and Ridge Height. You're welcome. I think you need to go up to the microphone.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for your long relationship and sponsorship of the Fishing Derby.
Do you know when, actually, that you mentioned it, do you know when that started?
32 years ago.
32 years.
1990.
Fairly contiguous since then.
Oh yeah, and it's just a highlight of the year for us. It's just a lot of fun. The kids have a great time. We call it the fastest minute in sports when we blow the whistle at 7 a.m. and just watch bobbers go flying and people trying to net fish. It's really quite funny.
How many usually come participate?
We usually, on average, about 100.
Mm.
We've had some tough years in the last couple of years, but we didn't have the Derby in 20.
Mm.
But last year, I think we had like 105, if I'm remembering correctly. A little over 100.
Thank you. Yeah.
So we are here again to ask for the donation that you guys have done for us to help us defray the cost of the fish. And I think since 2008, that amount has been $1,500. So we're here requesting that again.
And when is the fishing derby this year?
June 18th. It's always the Saturday before Father's Day.
All right. Any questions for Rich? Or
I just have a quick question. Is there an entry fee for that?
No. No, there used to be an entry fee. If you didn't register prior to the Derby day, the day of the Derby, we had a charge, but we waived that last year.
Okay.
I have a question. Have the costs remained stable since 2008?
I'm sorry?
Has the cost to put it on remained stable since 2008?
No, the fish prices have been going up quite a bit. I mean, right now we're averaging, I think, right around $2,400–2,500 over the last few years for the fish that we put in the pond. Whereas if you go back, you know, it's gone up. I think we've said around 3 to 6% over the last 15 years. So it does go up. They've been struggling with some droughts and things too. Some of the fisheries. So we've been struggling getting some fish. We've actually had to go to another fishery. Actually, the guy that usually gives us our fish has actually been able to secure other fish from other fisheries to bring them in. So it's been really helpful.
And where does the rest of the funding come from?
So I didn't mention Al Bennett is here, and John Lavoie, who hit the beat and go to all of our local businesses who have just been incredibly supportive over the years.
Every business we can, get gift certificates, anything we can get. And, you know, the town has been awesome, you know, all the restaurants and whoever else we hit, you know, most of them, you know, $10, it doesn't matter, $10 gift certificate. They've been very, very good to us.
Excellent.
And we do a raffle as well, and the raffle usually we'll get some donations and put them in as the raffle as well.
all right. Do we have a motion to approve funding?
I'll make the motion.
And your motion?
Oh, yes. Oh, you want me to make it?
You can state your motion.
I would like to make a motion that the Conservation Commission put $1,500 from the Conservation Fund toward the Newmarket Fishing Derby.
Second?
Second.
David, second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right.
Thank you once
Thank
again.
you for coming.
Thank you.
And I think
Have
we
fun.
can get together to talk
Yeah,
about
let's
some
get together and
opportunities.
chat about, because Rich and I were talking before about, you know, we're trying to say more about what we do as a conservation commission, and they're interested in the same, and we should just promote things that we're doing in the community so that
Yeah.
people know what the benefit is.
I mean, even just that turtle, I mean, just talking about what you guys are doing in terms of on Ashwamp Road and all of that, having that opportunity at the Derby so that people can see it, because it's 3 hours of fishing, and not everyone is, you know,
In the
on that
fishing.
fishing pond for 3 hours, so they do wander off, and that would be a great opportunity for the Conservation Commission. So,
Great.
and we have some other ideas too.
Great. All right, thanks, Rich. Thank you.
guys.
Thank you both for coming.
Be a good
Just
opportunity
on
for
the
all
turtle
of
thing, I
you.
live next to one of the conservation areas
Mm.
on Riverbend Road.
All right, yeah.
And every year for 25, 30 years that I've been there, turtles come up, lay their eggs in there, take off, and, you know, so it's nice to see that you know,
Yeah.
one of the areas is contributing to.
Yeah, that's the Fallett's Brook, probably you're back up to the Fallett's Brook, are you on that side?
I'm right on the Piscassic.
On the Piscassic, yeah, it's a great
Yeah.
corridor.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. Right now, there's actually a bobcat that might be living in the area as well.
Oh, that's very cool,
So,
yeah,
yeah.
very nice. Great, thank you. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have fun.
All right, committee board reports, planning board, Jeff.
In front of the planning board this week, there was a hearing for an extension of I wasn't on the planning board when this went through originally. It came to the conservation at one point for some wetland buffer impacts. It's at 81 Exeter Road. is Eric DeWitt. He came back with a new plan that he's trying to work through relatively quickly. So he'll be back in front of us again probably next month. And with that new plan, there may be some wetland fill and some more additional wetland buffer impacts. So I'm sure that will come back in front of the Conservation Commission at some point for input. I'm not sure. I didn't see that the plan was online at the moment of what he is up to and thinking of doing, but perhaps it'll be added because typically our agenda items are the full packets on there, but just this month's is not at the moment. And other than that, I don't think there was a lot. So actually, one more thing: the stormwater changes to subdivision and site plan. So, as you know, I've brought that up a couple of times. We kind of held off for a few months while there was a transition in the town planner, and with Bart coming on, he's kind of offered up a slightly different method of doing this. Instead of putting the new stormwater regulations in both pieces of both portions of the municipal code, it's gonna be in a single appendix and just be referenced in subdivision and site plans. Just simply say see Appendix C. So instead of having two sets of identical information, there'll be one single new stormwater plan. And we are going to kind of have a reading of that at our next meeting. Kind of hopefully get some public input. And I think that's about it.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. I just wanted to add a little bit. I did meet with Bart, our new town planner, and I think he's going to provide, as he spoke at our meeting last time, he's going to provide more help to the Conservation Commission because there's some overlap, and it blends nicely with Jeff's report. But he did. He's looking at the current use change tax to make sure we've gotten the funds we were supposed to get and to see if there's anything coming on board. So still doing a little bit more research on that. And he's also looking at the prime wetlands. Remember we discussed this last time. And so we originally had Mark West do the prime wetlands mapping in Newmarket. I think it was 2004. I can't remember the original date. But then the other thing that happened is those maps got digitized, which is what you were speaking to. I think the Stratford Regional Planning Commission did that. So Mark West, who's the wetland scientist, says that there's been a lot of change in the actual landscape of wetlands in the community, and because prime wetlands are actually in our code, in the land use code, they really should be redone because we're making decisions based on where those wetlands are when they were mapped back then. So Bart's going to look into that and see. That's sort of a planning task, but he may come to us and ask for our assistance somehow. I'm not sure yet, but anyway, he's looking into that.
It'd be great. It would be interesting to have Mark here and have him explain that to us.
Yeah, yeah.
And kind of go through a little bit as to how the map should be used and how prime wetlands should be mapped, or.
Yeah, I think the technology's gotten better on how more precision on how they map, and so before it could have included areas that weren't exactly wetlands, but it might be missing areas that are wetlands now. So there's reasons to do it to be fair to, to help protect wetlands, but also to be fair to landowners who may have them on their property. So, anything else for planning? No?
Sorry. I don't.
All right. Town council. So Colin White is not here. I just included the information in your packet about the public hearing that the town council had, the first reading on the reclassifying Newmarket Road from a Class 6 road to a Class 8 trail. And then the second hearing is May 18th, when presumably they'll then take a vote as well. So I just included that material for reference because we didn't have that at our last meeting. Riverfront Advisory. So Sam is not here. I have one piece of information from Bart on that. As he spoke last time, he said he might be able to help look into some things. There's two aspects to this. One is that he applied for, last Friday, he submitted a grant for a DES Flood Smart Seacoast project grant, which could help the town apply for FEMA funding to analyze the culverts under the pedestrian path in Moonlight Brook. So if you walk across the path in Moonlight Brook, there's these pretty awful looking culverts that don't seem to function very well. So that grant would be like a planning grant to assess, you know, is there something worth doing at Moonlight Brook, and then that in conjunction with maybe the living shoreline if we go that route too. So I think it's going to be great to have Bart to help the Riverfront Committee kind of pull those pieces together. And the thought there is that Moonlight Brook and the living shoreline, it's really a flooding project. It's not a big ecological project, right? We're trying to make it a nicer park and also protect the shoreline and improve Moonlight Brook. So anyway, so when Sam is back and the Riverfront community meets again, hopefully we keep moving that idea along, because I think it's a great one. The other piece was that we contacted Fish and Game because we had a question about those 4 parking spaces that have the boat and the trailer parking. Fish and Game has no ownership or authority on those 4 parking spaces, so they're not really in the picture, but it's related to how the funding around that park, and we haven't sorted that out yet, so somebody is still sleuthing that information.
Is that a Fish and Game boat launch at all? Does Fish
No.
and Game have anything to do with it?
No.
But
I don't think so.
they have the one over by the DPW. Is that theirs? Where ice fishing happens? 'Cause if
I
you
don't
go down
know.
there, I think there's a sign down there.
Yeah. No, apparently they don't have any, ours is not.
Interesting.
So. Okay, anything else on committees and reports? Okay, land stewardship projects and priorities. This is something that Melissa Sharples, as vice chair, and I have been talking about, because we have lots of, I'm going to pass these out. We started this, see, 2 of you that way, and 4 of you that way. So what we decided to do was, we have a lot of conservation areas. And we've been doing, you know, over the years, we've done stuff on numerous ones, and we're doing a lot right now. And there's probably more to be done on some of the other ones. So what we thought we would start with are some of the ones we were currently working on, and some of the bigger ones. We have Heron Point Sanctuary, Wigan Farm Conservation Area, Piscasset-Glazell Conservation Area, and Shanda Park. And what I handed out are spreadsheets for the first 3. And this is just sort of this year, things that we're working on or things that we think need to be done. And we don't necessarily have to go through, these aren't meant to like go through each of these tonight, but it's to get us started thinking about how do we, you know, keep track of what we think is needed on these conservation areas for good stewardship. And then, you know, at some point we should, you know, look at other conservation areas that we have, because he mentioned Riverbend. We've got little conservation areas everywhere across town, and we really need to, I think, step up and make sure we're caring for those well. So Piscasset-Glazell, Melissa's offered to kind of lead that. So maybe we could just go through that one as an example. Melissa, do you want to kind of go through those things that we talked about?
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I think based on the conversation tonight with Josh, we might want to add discussion about that field and how we manage it.
The field mowing?
The field mowing, and maybe we need to change, think about whether we want to change that.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'll let you describe
absolutely.
that.
So there's, you know, each property is going to have different elements to it. Some things that are the same, right? A checklist of things that we want to make sure we're getting done across all of the properties, and then each individual property obviously is going to have their own little nuances and tick list of their own. You know, one of the bigger things about Piscasset-Glazell that stands out is first on the list, cleaning out the bird boxes. I think we were late in doing that this year. In fact, we were literally standing in the parking lot talking about it. And is it too late? Do we have time? And a bird flew right into one of the boxes. So, all right, next year. So we want to make sure that, you know, we're staying in touch with Public Works around things like the entrance and plowing the parking lot. There had been, I think, some talk last year about whether or not we should put the fencing up at the head of the drive. And really, we want to keep it open so that the plows can just come through and push that snow right in and make it easier for the guys to do that. But we, just want to make sure that we're maintaining that, the fencing, the mowing. This information was really, really helpful today because that's a big deal. I think we really should talk about how we want to wait, what kind of time we want to do. So, and we also talked about signage for that area and what we can do there. So walk that site, but there's a little footbridge that goes over the brook in there, and that needs to be looked at and would make a good scout project. There's a bunch of things to do, and I think the more involved we get in these and take ownership of them individually, I think the more little projects we're going to come up with over time.
Yeah, so the thought was, Inherent Point is, you're familiar with those. We've talked about most of what we're doing there based on the grant, and then some other work. I did want to highlight a couple things that have been happening there, but Wigan Farm, again, we talked about some of the work out there. So what would be nice is, again, I don't think we need to do it tonight, but if you think about, and what we could do maybe for next meeting, I have the whole list of all the conservation areas and parks that we're sort of collectively responsible for, and we could take a look at it. And it would be nice if we each, picked one or two. It could be big ones, it could be small ones, it could be in partnership with one of, if somebody else is working on it too, and start to develop the same kind of sheet. So you just go visit the property, see if there's things that need to be done, and we may or may not have background information on some of those pieces that we got a long time ago, but so this is just something we can work on over the year. So maybe next time we'll have the full list and we can start looking at that. I did want to highlight Heron Point. It's just really great stuff been going out there. We got the $5,000 LRAC grant, so we're working on through that with the hazard trees. I'm working with the contractors on designing the panels for the kiosk. I was out a couple weeks ago with Amy Benson, the scout, who did her Eagle Scout project out there, rerouting the trail. Just outstanding morning with her and her scout mates and family and friends. Did an excellent job. She's just, top-notch work that she did there. And she's also going to put a picnic table. She talked about doing benches, but decided a picnic table out at the point, which I thought was a nice, because you get a bench, picnic table's a bench too. So I think that'll be her last piece. She did all the fundraising herself to fund to do the picnic table and other things. So just outstanding work there. Really happy with that. So that trail, she did a reroute of the trail, and we've got now trail markers. So the trails are all pretty well done. We've closed a few sections. So what we're going to do tomorrow is a Newmarket Day of Caring with the Newmarket Community Church. And we happen to be selected to have a group of students and adults join us tomorrow. Melissa and I are going to be there from 9 to 12. Anybody else is welcome. So we're going to have them spruce it up a little bit more. We've got to sweep the boardwalk. We've got to move a little bit of gravel. The main thing is putting in 4x4 signposts at trail junctions. Now that we have the trails set, we need to put some trail signs and some information on those trail junctures. So hopefully, and there'll be a few other little things we're going to do out there to keep sprucing it up. We had John Martin, remember last year, took all the trees down, hazard trees along the trail, but there were 2 at the trailhead that needed to come down using a crane, so we had Orion Tree Service do that through the grant in March, and then about 3 weeks ago, a dead tree fell on the boardwalk and broke it because it wasn't one we took down. So that was pretty frustrating, but thank you to DPW. They went out there and repaired the boardwalk, and another piece it was missing as well. And they are going to restain the kiosk, which needs some sprucing up. So just want to highlight what an incredible community effort Heron Point has become in terms of scouts, Newmarket Community Church, DPW, other volunteers we had last year.
Under your guidance.
Well, it's
Thank
just, it's a lot of people are interested in that place. And just as another really fun thing, I happened to have my dinner tonight, just decided to have it down at the Shanda Park. And there were, families there with young kids looking at the water. There were cormorants and ducks. And the kids and the adults were seeing great blue herons fly up and land on Heron Point. And then there was a beaver that was swimming out and up the bank of Heron Point, and then there was another one that slapped his tail. I mean, what a resource. It's really nice to be able to help make it a really community place, and it's such a great backdrop for Newmarket, so very
There was
cool.
a fox out there last weekend.
Fox out there last weekend. That's so great.
I've seen deer there too.
Deer, yeah, just so great. So anyway, that's what it's fun about really getting involved in a particular properties, because they're really worth it and people enjoy them. So that is kind of, anybody have any thoughts about this approach or working on this? And
I think it's great. I think it kind of gets back to like the core mission, which I think is really important. And it makes it easy when new members join too, to like see all the different properties and what goes into each of them. And then I think it'll be helpful if residents have questions, as we get to know the properties better individually, we'll be able to answer those questions. So I think it's great.
good.
I agree, because I feel like it can give me something more to do in
Yeah,
town,
there's,
and be a
there's-
part. Yeah, and I did have a specific question about the bird boxes. Was there a reason why you chose March and not in the fall to clear out the bird boxes?
We just,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
hadn't been done.
I think they get small
Yeah,
mammals
I
over
think.
winter, so sometimes they think of getting the small mammal nests out. That's why they do it in March.
Okay,
But
yeah.
yeah, it's
So if we can remember any time between
Exactly,
like,
yeah,
fall
I think-
migration and March.
exactly. Yeah. So that's So yeah, there's lots to do.
Yeah.
Want to involve lots of people, and it's really great.
I think this is a fantastic idea.
Mm.
I think it's super beneficial. There was so much, over the years, there was so much like individual knowledge about individual pieces of property, and if that one person forgot to mention that one thing about that one property, it got overlooked for a year or two even.
Yeah.
And so to have it all down like this, I think is just a very, very good idea.
Yeah, it's really hard for communities because we do we change. We're a volunteer board and we don't have staff, but that's one thing I talked to Bart also about is having the Conservation Commission files on the planning department web internal server, whatever they have, so that right now we have our records are like they're at somebody's house, over the years. They're just not, because we haven't had a good system. We have some here, and Sue's been great in terms of when she's been with us, but
I know that when I left the commission, I handed a hard drive to someone to copy all the files I had accumulated over 8 years,
Yeah.
and then somebody else had them, and if they passed them on, I don't know.
yeah, I've got what you had, I think, but it's and it's nobody's fault. It's just it's the nature of towns, and so we're hoping to sort of get this so that even this kind of information, it'll be that, and also we want to work on the website so that the visible part to the public, this kind of stuff. There's no reason. This is not sensitive. This kind of stuff is not sensitive, so we can put this kind of stuff up there on the town website. Sue?
I actually would like to see the monitoring reports with the pictures for those properties that we monitor and those that we don't. When we get a report, nobody really sees or they hear.
Yeah.
They didn't find anything. But there is a monitoring report, so there's something to say about each of the properties that needs monitoring, not just these other properties.
Absolutely, it's a great point. And I talked to Chris Blackstone because she's been working on the monthly meeting, the speakers, and I said reserve August because I think we should do a little training on easement monitoring and just like you were saying, okay, let's look at all the properties we're supposed to monitor. Again, people change, so we need to say who wants to monitor what. And you're right, the reports get done, but then we don't really look at them.
Yeah.
So it defeats the purpose. So yeah, so that's sort of a two-track. We have the lands that the town owns, the fee properties, which are these, and then there's the easements we hold that we have to monitor. So lots to do.
I'm glad you're doing the training, because when I walked Fullets Brook in December, I was excited to do the walk, but I felt a little bit ill-prepared, and I documented everything I could, but I felt like I didn't quite know how to fill out the form. So I think that training will be really good.
And the other thing, the monitoring reports, if they're private lands, you typically don't put them on the public website, but what we can put up there is if there's a boundary survey, if there's an easement deed, there will be, the template for the monitoring form. So you could, you don't have to call me or call Sue or come in here. It'll be on the website.
Right.
And you download all that information. You just look at it.
Yeah.
And there'll be photos or whatever. So, yeah. So
Great.
we got lots to do.
Yeah.
All right, great. So we'll keep working on that. All right, events. Melissa, I don't think we've had a recap.
Yeah, we haven't had a recap. So the cleanup this year was really, really great. Everybody kind of pitched in, and it was really great to get all the pictures and see all the little kids that were involved. So there were 22 either individuals or families or groups that signed up for the cleanup, and they signed up to clean up 37 streets, plus around both schools and the rec department. And as someone who visits the playground around the rec department, I know, it's no one person's fault, but there's just a lot of kids. There ends up being a lot of trash. So it was exciting that the Girl Scouts signed up to do that again. Iron Goat Equipment donated their services, and they picked up 4 pieces of large debris. And the town of Newmarket donated the blue bags, which people could take to the transfer station for no fee, which was great. And we had 7 unique finds that were submitted for the photo contest, so that was really fun. Overall, a little bit less, I think, than last year, but that's kind of to be expected. Last year there were some streets that probably hadn't been cleaned in a long time, so it makes sense that more trash would have been found last year. And it also makes sense that we had more large debris last year than this year because, just had been a while. So, and a couple of streets got cleaned this year that didn't get cleaned last year. For example, 108 kind of near the Calvary Cemetery, which they found a lot of trash there, especially related, sort of cemetery debris, and then also just general litter that you see along most roadsides. So it was kind of exciting to have some new roads signed up for too.
That's awesome.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
Can the blue bags still be brought to the transfer station?
I believe so. I could email Rick and ask.
I was going to do it last weekend, and I was building a
I think
playset all
it's
day.
the color of the bag matters, obviously, because they know
Yeah.
the blue bags are from the town. And if you tell them it's from the cleanup, I'm sure that they would. But I can email him and find out.
Thanks.
Because I did give him the dates of the cleanup,
Yeah.
so he had those in the calendar.
Right.
But
I know I ran out of time
Yeah.
during that time frame,
Yeah.
and I had the next weekend. I was like, I really wanted to do the part beyond my house that I didn't do last year, or I collected far more than I did from the much longer section.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
And so then I was like, I have all these bags, and then last weekend I couldn't bring it. So
I'm sure they'll take it.
Yeah, I can find out for you.
Yeah.
okay.
A couple trash-related things. I thought this was great. This the Public Works sent out this pick up your pet waste. Did everybody get one in the mail? I thought that was so good that they sent that around to everybody because it's important.
Yeah.
So that's a great one.
I actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. I just want to mention, I'm not sure if everybody is aware, even though there is a sign, dogs are not allowed in Shanda Park. It seems like a cut through from from the boat launch to the neighborhood that's on the other side. But we want to just make sure that we're, following the standard and that it is marked. There are no dogs allowed.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Thank you for that. The other, it's sort of a trash thing, but I noticed it because our trash pickup is on Wednesday morning. And I don't know how you get the message out, but some people, I guess because they're busy in the morning, they put their trash out the night before. And that's it doesn't work for local wildlife for 2 things. One is that some get into the bag and then the trash is all over the road the next morning. And it's actually really unhealthy for the animals that get into it. It either makes them more of a pest, like a raccoon or a skunk, and they might eat something that's not healthy, and it just scatters some pretty awful stuff all over the road. So if we can just help get the message out that either, you can buy a bin and put your trash bag in a bin that closes so that wildlife can't get in it, or take the extra 2 minutes to put it out in the morning. If you
Plus, because we have the manual recycling collection, we have uncovered bins, not the covered bins. So then even if it's just windy.
Right, it blows around.
People are trying to do great things by recycling, which is awesome. But, if you put it out on a windy, rainy night, then the next day it's just going to be all over the street.
Yeah. Yeah, I was a little frustrated after I did all the cleanup, and then I was like, it's all dirty again. Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
I just like that. I mean, I know it seems crazy, but if there are people watching, please don't throw your garbage out the window of your car
Yes,
as
no
you drive
littering,
down the road.
absolutely.
There's
Yeah.
some, or if you have an opportunity to look up, microplastics in water bodies and how
Yeah.
detrimental it is to,
Yeah.
living
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
take that into consideration
Right.
when you're tossing the bottle out the window.
Yeah.
Well, and even
Or
cigarette
cup.
butts, I mean, those are
Cigarette butts.
microplastics, the
Yeah.
filters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I've learned is when you throw your stuff out the window, it's bringing like small mice and things to roadsides,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
then attracts the owls and the hawks.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
And
I've
ticks.
seen increased owls
Ticks, yeah.
and hawks hit by cars.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
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 Interesting.
Yeah, we could all do a little better in
Yeah.
how we treat the planet. Great, thank you again for coordinating that one more time. That was really good. I mentioned the Day of Caring tomorrow with Newmarket Community Church. May 14th, Saturday, I did cancel the invasive plant work at Wigan Farm. Just a lot going on, and 2 days in a row, and it's going to be 80 degrees, and just couldn't swing it. So we'll reschedule that.
Hot day.
Yeah, it's just after tomorrow, we're going to be really busy, so sorry about that. Decided just to not have that one. And then our next meeting is June 9th. As been mentioned, Matt Larkin is with USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service, the district conservationist. And that's going to be really interesting because Josh mentioned funding from NRCS, but typically towns are not eligible for NRCS funding. So it'll be interesting to hear from him to see what can, a place like, as a town, what we can do. I know, are there funding for some of the things we talked about, like with Josh? So that should be good. All right, any other thoughts, questions, comments?
Quick question, you said the May 14th thing is canceled?
Yes, I
Okay.
canceled Saturday. We're not going to do that.
Darn, I was gonna be there.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Pulling invasives is very therapeutic.
Yeah.
I was pulling buckthorn along Neal Mill Road Trail
Yeah, they're
just today.
good.
I was like,
Yeah, good. Yeah, we'll reschedule. Just the timing wasn't quite right with, we got a big day tomorrow, so.
I wonder if there would be an opportunity in the future to partner with another conservation commission and help them one day on
Yeah.
one of their properties, and then they could come help us.
Yeah.
Not that, I mean, it's also always great to have public volunteers. Obviously, I'm a huge supporter of volunteers, but
Yeah.
might be kind of nice too to
Yeah.
work with
Yeah.
a neighboring conservation
It's a
commission.
good idea. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but we'll reschedule, so we'll get you out there, David.
There's someone on the Epping Commission I could ask if they're interested.
Who's that?
Yeah,
I know someone
Lee,
on the Epping Commission.
Yeah.
See if they're interested.
and Lee follows us on
Yeah.
Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
they might be interested.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a good idea. That's a really good idea. We should. Okay, then motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Great, thank you.